Hi, scholars. This is Miss Mailer, and today we're going to be reading a story. Now, before we read our story, we're going to be looking at some slides that I made so that we know what we will be able to do after we learn our lesson today and learn some important words and refresh our minds on our anchor charts that are so important for us to remember as good readers. Okay, scholars. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about what you can do after the lesson today. I'm going to say it first, and then you can say it after me together. Okay? Here we go. I can point under each word. Let's say that together. Here we go. I can point under each word. Good job, scholars. Okay. Our next one, I'm going to say it first. I can read from left to right and from top to bottom. Let's say that together. I can read from left to right and from top to bottom. Good job, scholars. Last one. I'm going to say it first. Here we go. I can tell the difference between a letter and a word. Let's say that together. Here we go. I can tell the difference between a letter and a word. Awesome job, scholars. Let's move on to our important words of our lesson. Our first important word is track. Tracking means to be looking at someone or something. So if I'm tracking you, I'm looking at you. If you're tracking me, you are looking at me. For example, let's look at this picture. This little girl is tracking her teacher. She is looking at her teacher. This little girl is tracking her story. She is looking at her story. So tracking is when you are looking at someone or something. Awesome. Let's look at our next word. Our next word is letter. Letter is a single letter that makes one sound and is part of a word. These are all of the letters in our alphabet. So our letters A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on. All of those letters are one letter that make a sound and can be part of a word. Awesome. Let's look at our last word, scholars. Our last word today is the word word. A word is made up by multiple letters or more than one letter. Let's look at our first word. Our first word is the word in. This word is made up of the letter I and the letter N. Together, those two letters make a word, in. Let's look at our second word. Our second word is the word the. This word is made up by three letters, T, H, E. The. All three letters work together to make one word. So a word is made up of more than one letter. Awesome. Okay, before we start reading, we're going to do one more thing. We're going to look at our anchor charts that help us be good readers. So our first anchor chart is telling us that we need to make sure that we are touching each word while we read. Scholars, we need to touch each word while we read. Now, are we supposed to touch on top of the word? No, then we can't see what we're reading. Should we touch under the word? Yes, we should touch under the word. Good job, scholars. That way we can see what the word is each time we point. Good job, scholars. All right. Our next anchor chart is telling us how we should read. We are reading from left to right and from top to bottom. Let's say that together, scholars. We read left to right and from top to bottom. Awesome. Let's look at our next one. Our next one talks about letters and words. These are letters. A, B, C, D, E, F. All of the letters in the alphabet are one letter that make a unique sound. If you put letters together, then you can make words. So for example, we have the word fox. The word fox is made up by the letter F, the letter O, and the letter X. Those three letters use their unique sounds together to make a word. Awesome. That's the word fox. Let's look at our last anchor chart, scholars. Our last anchor chart is showing us what sentences are. If you put multiple words together, you can make a sentence. Let's look at this sentence. The apple is red. 1, 2, 3, 4. I noticed there are 4 words in this sentence. Now, one more thing to remember about sentences is that the words in a sentence are separated by spaces. So these green arrows are showing us the spaces in our sentence. Let's read that. The space, apple, space, is, space, red. The spaces show us where each word starts and where each word ends. That way, we can read easier. Awesome, scholars. Now that we're done looking at our slides, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to go ahead and start reading. Okay, scholars, today we are going to be reading a nursery rhyme called Hickory, Dickory, Dock. While we read today, I want to practice all the skills that we have learned so far. Get ready. Here we go. Hickory, dickory, dock. The mouse ran up the clock. Scholars, I want to stop at clock. I want to figure out if it's a letter or if it's a word. I know that letters are just one letter alone. And if there's more than one letter, it's a word. So I think we need to count the letters in the word or in clock. We need to count the letters in clock to see if it's a word. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I noticed that there are 5 letters in clock. That makes it a word because all 5 letters are working together. All right, scholars. Let's keep reading. The clock struck 12 and down he went. Oh, wait a minute, scholars. Am I pointing in the right spot? Should I be pointing on top of the word? No, I shouldn't. How am I going to read this word if it's covered up by my finger? Silly Miss Mailer forgot where to point. So I'm going to stop and think, where do good readers point? Do they point over the word? No. Do they point on top of the word? No, that's what Silly Miss Mailer just did. But what if they point under the word? Yes, that's right. Good readers point under the word so that they can see what they're reading. Awesome. I'm going to point under the words when I read. Good job, scholars. All right. Hickory, Dickory, dock. Scholars, let's look at dock. Is this a letter or a word? If you know the answer to that question, raise your hand and your teacher will ask you to share. Teachers, now is a good time to pause the video. Scholars, you're right. The dock is a word because it's made up of more than one letter. How many letters is it made of? Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4. So dock is a word because it's made up of more than one letter, or 4 letters. Awesome, scholars. Okay, scholars, I have one more question for you. Let's go back to the 3rd line in our story. The clock struck 12 and down he went. Oh boy, Miss Mailer forgot where she needs to go next. Where do good readers go when they get to the last word of the line? Scholars, if you know the answer to this question, raise your hand and your teacher will ask you to share. Teachers, now is a good time for you to pause the video. Scholars, you are right. Once you reach the end of a line, the word went in this line, you have to move from top to bottom. Just like that. Because good readers read from left to right and from top to bottom. Awesome. So if we ended down he went, we would move down to this line and read Hickory, Dickory, dock. Good job, scholars. Okay, I have 2 more questions for you, scholars. My first question is, where do good readers point while they read? Where do good readers point while they read? If you know the answer to this question, raise your hand and your teacher will ask you to share. Teachers, now is a good time to pause the video. Scholars, you're right. Good readers point under the words, because that way we can point to what we are reading and we are able to see it. That's right. Okay, scholars, my last question for you today is, what way do good readers point while they read? If you know the answer to that question, raise your hand and your teacher will ask you to share. Teachers, now is a good time to pause the video. Oh my gosh, scholars, you are working so hard today. You're right. Good readers read from left to right and from top to bottom. Awesome job, scholars. You are such great readers. Okay, that is the end of our lesson today, teachers. Because your scholars worked so hard, go ahead and pick a cheer that you can do together. Maybe you can pick a scholar who's being an active reader the whole time, okay? Scholars, I had so much fun with you. I will see you next time we read together. Bye, scholars.